My daughter Laura took my lakeside villa and handed the keys to her in-laws, declaring, "It's theirs now, your presence is forbidden." From that moment my world shattered. I stood on my own terrace, bag at my feet, as strangers lounged in my favorite chair and sipped coffee in my wife's memory-filled home. Follow my story to the end and drop a comment with the city you're watching from. So, the 2-hour drive from San Diego to Lake Haven had always been my sanctuary. I had dutifully maintained that turquoise-roofed villa ever since my wife Margaret passed away. Each summer I'd escape the city heat, keen to feel the gentle breeze off the lake and hear the loons call at dusk. Two figures stood on the terrace, one in a crisp white bathrobe, the other stiff in an identical getup. My bag slipped from my fingers as I slowed to a crawl. The taller woman, her dark hair gleaming in the late afternoon sun, turned. "Dad, you shouldn't have come," she said flatly. Her voice, Laura's voice, sounded like ice cracking. Behind her, a tall man shifted uncomfortably but offered no greeting. My name. Robert Miller had been spoken with such finality it felt like a verdict. "You shouldn't have come." I parked against the gravel drive and tried to steady my racing heart. "Laura," I began, but the word felt hollow. Memories of bedtime stories and scraped knees flooded me for a moment, then vanished under her cold stare. "This is now our weekend home," she announced, voice rising. "You don't get to use it anymore." Her husband, Mark, cleared his throat. "We've got plans, Dad." His tone was polite, but carried the same dismissal I felt in Laura's eyes. "We're here first." I swallowed. "I built this place, every beam, every window, with Margaret." My voice wavered. "It's mine." "Technically," Laura said, "but I transferred it." She held up a thin folder, the one I had entrusted to her care. "It's theirs now." She gestured to Mark's parents, Helen and Tom, who had just emerged from their car, eyes bright with anticipation. I felt the world tilt. The driveway stretched out behind me, empty and long, yet it felt like a river carrying me away from everything I knew. I picked up my weekend bag, now heavy with shock and anger, and managed a shaky nod. "Fine," I said, my voice sounding distant. "I'll go." Laura's lips quirked into something almost smug. "Next time, call first before showing up on our property." I walked backward each step on the gravel, like retreating from a battlefield I hadn't realized I was fighting. The gravel crunched beneath my feet as I reached my car. My hands trembled as I seized the steering wheel knuckles, whitening. In the rearview mirror, I watched my daughter settle into her role as homeowner, while Helen and Tom laughed over coffee steaming gently in their mugs. By the time I drove off, the villa was already slipping out of my grasp, her grasp. The lake's calm surface gleamed in the distance, mocking the storm inside me. Back in San Diego that evening, I sat in my study staring at the cold glow of my laptop. The walls, lined with photos of my construction projects, felt like a gallery of accomplishments, now overshadowed by one act of familial cruelty. I scrolled through property records until my vision blurred. The deed did indeed bear my name, but Laura had used the power of attorney I'd signed years ago for emergencies. She deemed this emergency enough. My phone rang once, twice, each ring heightening the pit in my stomach. I willed myself not to answer. After 3 days of silent stew, Friday night arrived. I sat alone with a plate of pasta and the TV muted. Every ring felt like a test of my restraint. Every text from Laura felt like salt in an open wound. "Hope you understand why we had to do this. Delete." Saturday morning found me at my sister Nancy's. Over strong coffee and her sympathetic frown, I recounted the confrontation. Nancy's eyes filled with anger on my behalf. "You can't let her get away with this." I shook my head. She's my only child. I don't want to ruin our relationship." My voice cracked. "But how do I get back something that's been given away?" Nancy pointed out the legal gap I'd ignored for decades. "You need help," she said. "Call your attorney tomorrow." At dawn on Sunday, I called Marcus Chen, my longtime business lawyer. Hearing his voice steadied me. We set an appointment for Tuesday. He promised to explore every legal avenue to protect my rights. Hanging up, I felt the first flicker of hope. Yet the clock ticked toward the following Saturday, exactly 1 week since Laura's betrayal. Mark's parents were due to move in, then convinced it was already theirs. I pictured them measuring walls and arranging furniture, presuming victory. That night, I lay awake replaying every word. "Take your villa. It's theirs now." I realized I had become a man resigned to defeat, but not for long. As the clock chimed past midnight, clarity struck. Laura had given me her timeline. In 1 week, she expected to settle in. That deadline was my advantage, not hers. Grief and anger gave way to strategy. I would reclaim my home not with raw emotion, but with deliberate precision. I had built an empire on planning and negotiation. Now I'd apply those skills to protect what was mine. I pictured the path ahead: legal reviews, protective measures, the eventual coup de grace that would remind everyone who truly owned the villa. Monday morning, I showered and dressed in a crisp shirt, no longer a grieving, defeated father, but a strategist ready to defend his territory. I paused before my study's mirror and said, "This villa is my legacy. No one takes it from me. The week ahead would determine whether I remained a victim or became a victor." But for the first time since that fateful Friday, I felt a spark of confidence. Laura had turned my refuge into her playground. Soon I would turn her plan into a monument to my own resilience. And this was only the beginning. On Tuesday morning, I woke before dawn, nerves prickling in my chest like static. The sun was a pale promise through the bedroom window as I dressed in a crisp navy blazer, my game face, I'd call it. My heart pounded as I drove the familiar freeway toward downtown, rehearsing the questions I'd lob at Marcus Chen, my long-trusted attorney. I needed clarity on how to stop my daughter's theft, how to claw back the lakeside villa she'd declared off-limits, and how to do it without burning every bridge in our family. Marcus's office occupied the top floor of a sleek glass building overlooking the harbor. I arrived at 8:45 minutes early and let the security guard swipe my name. The lobby smelled of polished marble and fresh coffee. When I stepped into Marcus's mahogany-paneled suite, he rose from behind his desk with a warm smile that never failed to steady me. "Robert," he said, extending his hand, "good to see you. Though I'm sorry for the circumstances. I'll say I managed easing into the leather guest chair. Thanks for fitting me in so quickly." I laid the property deed and power of attorney document on his desk. "I need to protect my villa. My daughter and her husband forcibly took over last week and just transferred ownership to his parents. They're moving in this weekend." Marcus leaned forward, scanning the papers. "Your power of attorney? Did you really sign that over without reading the fine print?" I did. I admitted shame, tightening my throat. 3 years ago, after Margaret died, I panicked over estate planning. I trusted Laura with backup access if I became incapacitated. I never imagined she'd use it against me. He nodded, empathy creasing his brow. "Power of attorney can be a double-edged sword. It grants broad authority. Let's revoke it immediately. Then we institute a trust or an LLC so the property can't be transferred without multiple signatures. How fast can we do that?" My voice shook on we. "Revocation can be drafted today, notarized and filed with the county clerk by tomorrow." For additional protection, a trust depends on complexity, but we can have a basic, revocable living trust in place within a week. A week, the same time frame Laura had given me before her in-laws moved in. I swallowed. My priority is stopping them before they cross the threshold this Saturday. Marcus tapped his pen. Then our first step is to file a temporary restraining order TRO against Laura Jack and his parents. We argue wrongful exercise of POA and immediate harm to your property rights. If granted, law enforcement will enforce the order preventing them from entering the villa until the court hears the full case. I felt the tension in my shoulders ease just a fraction. What evidence do they require? Your deed, the revoked POA, your affidavit, describing the forced eviction and any communications texts, emails showing their intent to transfer property unlawfully. Document everything. The judge wants to see clear proof of imminent harm. I nodded, mentally tallying the texts I'd deleted. I saved the deed and a folder of emails. The texts. I'll retrieve them from backups. He smiled encouragingly. Good. I'll draft the TRO this afternoon. Can you be back here at 3 to sign? Absolutely. Relief and adrenaline warred inside me. I stood, shook Marcus's hand. Thank you. I don't know what I'd do without you. Let's get your home back. His reassurance felt like armor around my ragged heart. I left his office lighter than I'd felt all week, buoyed by possibility. The rest of Tuesday blurred into a flurry of logistics. I spent the morning at home logging onto my computer to retrieve backup texts. Laura's messages were predictably smug. Hope you're finding new weekend plans, but they now served as evidence of her bad faith. By noon, I had a stack of printouts. My phone buzzed with a message from Nancy. Remember to breathe. I typed back a grateful emoji and forced myself to eat a sandwich, though my stomach felt as hollow as my empty villa. At 3:00, I returned to Marcus's office. He greeted me with a freshly printed TRO. Sign here, here, and here, he directed, running his finger along each signature line. We'll file this immediately. The hearing is scheduled for Thursday morning, 48 hours from now. 48 hours. My pulse thundered again at the ticking clock. I pictured Helen and Tom Thompson hauling boxes up those Lakeview stairs, certain of victory. Now they'd be locked out by law until we resolved the matter. Justice, after months of slumber, was finally waking. On Wednesday, I spent the day completing the trust documents. I met with Marcus at noon for a final review, and by late afternoon the trustee agreement was signed, notarized, and effective immediately. My villa now sat in the Robert Miller Family Trust, requiring 2 trustees, myself, and a trusted family friend to authorize any property changes. Laura's unilateral transfer was effectively reversed. That afternoon, I took a break at Murphy's Diner, our family spot since I brought Laura home from the hospital. Over coffee and fries, I allowed a flicker of gratitude to break through my exhaustion. I'd protected my property, yes, but I also noticed the weight lifting from my shoulders, as if I'd reclaimed not just land, but dignity. Thursday dawned with steel blue skies. I arrived at the courthouse at 8:30, briefcase in hand and adrenaline surging. Marcus met me at the security line. "Ready?" he asked. "More than I have been," I admitted. His calm steadied me. We found Judge Halstead's courtroom, a windowless box where my fate would be decided. Laura, Jack, Helen, and Tom sat grouped to my left, their confident demeanor already drained by uncertainty. The judge entered robes, whispering, and took his seat. Marcus presented our TRO petition, walking the court through the abusive transfer, the misused POA, and the pending trust. He laid out text from Laura, Dad, you're in the way, and the deed showing my unrevoked ownership. I sat quietly, heart pounding, replaying Laura's command, leave now. When Laura's attorney spoke, he argued that as agent under the POA, she had broad discretion, that the POA was still valid and should remain so. The lawyer's voice was brisk, his rhetoric practiced, but Judge Halstead's face remained unreadable. After both sides spoke, the judge paused, reviewing the binder of evidence. Then, with a gentle thump of his gavel, he granted the TRO. Order is effective immediately, he declared. Mr. Miller's ownership is legally protected until the full hearing. Any attempt by the respondents to enter the property will be considered contempt of court. Relief washed over me like rain after drought. I exhaled, tears stinging my eyes as I thanked Marcus. He patted my shoulder, pride shining in his eyes. We'll address the full case at the permanent injunction hearing next month, but for now, your villa is yours. Outside the courtroom, I spotted Laura's tear-streaked face. Betrayal replaced by shock and rage. She glared at me as I walked by, but I walked tall, empty water bottle in hand, lungs full of clean air. Back at my study that afternoon, I savored the tranquility. My phone buzzed with texts. Court order granted. Congrats from Nancy and Marcus. I allowed myself a tired smile. The villa would remain my refuge. Laura's attempt at theft was stopped dead in its tracks. Next up, preparing for the permanent hearing, strengthening my case, and ensuring no further surprises. That night, I stood on my little balcony, my real one in San Diego, looking at the city lights. The week's tension ebbed, leaving a clear path forward. I raised my coffee mug in a silent toast to justice, to preparation, and to the boundaries I'd fought so hard to reclaim. The road to peace was never easy, but I knew I was back on the right path, and this was just part 2 of a story far from over. Tuesday morning broke with a crisp clarity I hadn't felt in years. The TRO had stood firm, my villa safe for now, but the real battle loomed, the permanent injunction hearing set for 2 weeks later. I spent Monday gathering every scrap of evidence I could find, bank statements showing maintenance payments, invoices for Margaret's artwork, framing photographs dating back to our first summer at the lake. Each file felt like a nail in the coffin of Laura's claim. That afternoon, my phone buzzed with a single text from her, "We need to talk. Lawyer wants mediation before the hearing." Relief and annoyance warred in my chest. Mediation meant a chance to settle without trial, but it also meant facing her again, her smug confidence, the steel behind her eyes. I called Marcus that evening. "Let's do it," I said over the phone. "If there's a path to resolution, I'll take it." Marcus's voice was calm. "I'll schedule it. But remember, our leverage is strong. TRO trust, clear deed. We enter mediation from a position of power." On Wednesday, I drove to the courthouse's mediation room, an unremarkable carpeted chamber with a long oak table and wary floral wallpaper. On one side sat Laura and Jack, both in crisp business attire. Jack glanced at me briefly, eyes flickering with guilt or calculation, I couldn't tell which. Laura stared straight ahead, arms folded. Our mediator, a silver-haired retired judge named Sullivan, opened with neutral courtesy. "This session is confidential," he reminded us. "Let's find common ground." Jack launched into a rehearsed apology. "Dad, we're sorry for how we handled the villa. We felt abandoned after Mom died and thought living here would make us feel closer to you. Laura added, voice softer than I'd heard. I never meant to hurt you. We just panicked and made a terrible mistake. Marcus responded for me. I appreciate the apology, but property rights aren't forgiven by feelings. My client's home was taken without consent. We need a binding solution. Sullivan steered us through options: co-ownership, buyout, or transfer under conditions. Jack proposed buying me out of the villa, but their finances weren't strong enough for a fair offer. Laura suggested they move into the guest house still on my property, still under my control. But I shook my head. I'm willing to help, I said, voice steady. But I can't share my home with the people who tried to steal it. I need exclusive use. Laura's jaw clenched. That's not fair. You have money. We're just starting our careers. Fair, I thought. The bitterness flared every empty weekend I'd imagined here. Every sunset I'd hoped to watch in Margaret's memory had been stolen. Fairness isn't about starting capital, I replied. It's about respecting boundaries. The mediator wrote notes. After 2 hours of give and take, it was clear mediation had failed. Laura stood abruptly glaring. Then we see you in court. She stormed out, Jack trailing behind with a sympathetic look. I felt no triumph, only the prelude to a more formal showdown. Over the next week, I doubled down on preparation. I rehearsed my testimony, how Margaret and I had chosen every aspect of the villa, how it embodied our shared dreams. I refined my exhibits, dated pictures of us painting walls, letters from the architect, logs of my upkeep. I even visited the villa early each morning, walking through empty rooms as if reclaiming them, letting the memory of Margaret's laughter echo in my mind. Friday night, I barely slept. Instead, I lay awake comparing strategies, Laura's likely angles, claim of emotional hardship, assertion that I'd neglected her needs, and my counter's explicit power of attorney revocation, trust documents, and the TRO record. I felt the familiar hum of legal strategy course through me, as exhilarating as finalizing a multi-million-dollar contract. Saturday dawned, and I flew up to Lake Haven, my practice villa, for the hearing. Margaret's garden was blooming, her beloved roses perfuming the air. I walked the terraces, noting the morning light on the lake. I felt grounded, fortified by the land itself. Sunday was quiet, almost serene, but I spent it drafting a last-minute twist, a charitable remainder trust. In a burst of inspiration, I realized I could transfer the villa into a charity I'd long wanted to support, an organization providing transitional housing for widowed seniors like me. I'd create a life estate for myself, unfettered access until my death, and irrevocably grant the remainder to the charity. That move would resolve the dispute forever. Neither Laura nor Jack's parents could claim ownership once the trust was in place. That night I emailed the draft to Marcus with the subject line, "Charitable solution, please advise." I fell asleep dreaming of justice coupled with generosity, a final gesture, honoring Margaret's kindness while protecting my dignity. Monday morning, Marcus called. "The plan is legally sound," he confirmed. "You'll need to execute the deed transfer and trust agreement today. We can record it tomorrow before the hearing." We met at his office at noon. The trust documents lay ready, complete, with my life estate clause and the beneficiary charity's details. Laura's face flickered across my mind. I owed her no quarter. I signed the deed, then the trust, each pen stroke an assertion of control. Marcus notarized, and I left with a sense of finality I'd never felt before. Tuesday arrived with bright promise. I turned on the morning news in my study and spotted a segment on our courtroom battle. Laura, neatly framed, said, "I just want my home back." I paused the TV, put my hand over the remote, and let myself smile. Producer or not, her plea sounded hollow against the reality of irrevocable trust documents, now safely filed in the county recorder's office. That afternoon, I packed my bag for the hearing. In my briefcase, the TRO order, trust, deed, power of attorney, revocation photos, emails, and the newly recorded trust agreement. Each was a shield against her claim. Wednesday morning, I returned to Judge Halstead's courtroom. Laura and Jack sat across the aisle, grim-faced. Helen and Tom looked downtrodden shadows under their eyes. Marcus opened the session, presenting the trust agreement as incontrovertible evidence that I no longer owned the villa outright. The remainder belonged to charity, not individuals. Laura's attorney sputtered, calling the move cold-hearted, but Judge Halstead held up the trust. "Mr. Miller has the legal right to transfer property to a charitable trust," he said. "The life estate ensures his continued use. The court recognizes this instrument as valid and irrevocable." He paused, then added, "This case is closed." A murmur rippled through the gallery. Laura's knuckles whitened as she gripped the bench, her eyes wide with disbelief. Jack leaned forward, but the judge's gavel snapped down before he could intervene. Outside the courthouse, Laura stared at me, fury and despair flickering across her face. I raised my head, meeting her gaze with quiet resolve. "I wish you well," I said. She turned and stalked away, Jack trailing the toll of her own actions clear on their shoulders. In the car ride home, my hands relaxed on the wheel for the first time since this nightmare began. Margaret's laughter seemed to drift on the breeze through my open windows. I drove through the city, the villa miles behind me, but in my heart I carried its peace. I'd fought for my home, confronted my daughter's betrayal, and emerged not only victorious, but liberated free at last, to honor Margaret's memory with the boundaries and grace she would have wanted for me. The morning after the injunction hearing, I woke to an unfamiliar calm. For the first time in weeks, my mind wasn't racing with legal strategies or contingency plans. Instead, I lay in bed, savoring silence as sunlight filtered through the blinds in soft golden slats. I thought of Margaret and how she always prized peaceful mornings. Today felt like one she'd have loved. I dressed slowly, choosing a crisp white shirt and khakis instead of my usual blazer. No need for armor now. I poured a cup of coffee and carried it to the living room where photographs of our life together lined the mantel. Wedding portraits, family barbecues, and that first snapshot of the villa by the lake. I touched the frame of our final vacation photo, Margaret's laughter frozen in the sunshine, and smiled through tears. At 9 o'clock, I called my trustee, Nancy. "Let's finalize arrangements for the charitable trust's inaugural event," I said. She laughed, relief in her voice. "I was just about to call you. We're expecting our first group of widowed veterans next month." Her enthusiasm buoyed me. Translating this victory into something meaningful for others like me who'd lost spouses felt like the perfect tribute to Margaret's memory. Nancy and I spent the morning discussing the guest list, arranging accommodations at the very villa that had been the battleground. I felt a thrill at the irony wounded strangers would arrive this summer to find comfort in the home that once felt cursed. By noon, we had dates, catering quotes, and a tentative schedule for wellness workshops on the terrace. Even as I planned, I sensed the villa itself, with its sunlit rooms and gentle breezes, pulsating with renewed purpose. After lunch, I decided to drive up to Lake Haven. I needed to see the villa restored to its rightful state, free of lingering legal shadows. The 2-hour trip felt like a pilgrimage, As the freeway gave way to winding mountain roads, memories crept back of fishing trips with Margaret, of Laura's teenage laughter echoing across the water. But now, each turnover in the road brought anticipation, not dread. I arrived to find Derek already there, pruning the rose bushes Margaret had planted. He waved his smart home equipment, long since removed, a testament to moving on. "Hey, boss," he called. "Looks good, doesn't it?" "It does," I agreed, stepping onto the terrace where the wood was newly sealed and the railings freshly stained. The morning sun made the lake shimmer. "Thank you for all you did." Derek shrugged modestly. "Happy to help. This place deserves to be loved, not fought over." We walked through the villa together. In the family room, I relit the fireplace, an old gas model I'd installed for Margaret's cozy evenings. In the kitchen, I ran my hand over the marble countertops we'd chosen together. Every corner felt like home again. But it wasn't just a building. It was a living memorial. "Ready for the veteran group next month?" Derek asked as we passed through the sunroom. I nodded. "I want them to feel welcome. I've arranged yoga on the lawn and art therapy in here." I gestured around the spacious room, imagining easels set up by the windows. "This place healed me. Maybe it can heal them too." Derek paused, turning to look at me with genuine respect. "That's powerful, Robert." His words hit me harder than any courtroom victory. I realized that this chapter, transforming personal pain into communal solace, was the true legacy I'd been seeking. That afternoon I met with our caterer, Maria, a warm woman whose family had served in the Navy. Over steaming bowls of clam chowder in the villa's dining room, we discussed menus, fresh lake trout, roasted vegetables, berry cobbler. "These folks deserve something special," she said. "Comfort food that nourishes the body and the soul." I felt the gratitude swell in my chest. Exactly. By early evening I was alone again, standing on the deck as the sun dipped below the peaks. The sky turned pink and lavender, the water reflecting every hue. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply, feeling Margaret's presence as surely as I'd felt Laura's betrayal. The contrast was bittersweet but necessary. That night I slept better than I had in months. My dreams were filled with laughter and light, not conflict. I woke refreshed, ready for the next step, rebuilding a relationship with Laura if she was ever ready. I knew forgiveness would be its own journey, but the first step was forgiveness of myself for every unchecked boundary, every misplaced kindness. I had learned that self-respect was the truest form of love. On Thursday, I returned to San Diego for a city council luncheon honoring charitable work. As I accepted a plaque for founding the Lakeside Legacy Trust, I noticed Laura in the audience. She sat with arms crossed, but her eyes were softer than I'd last seen. After the ceremony, she approached hesitant. "Dad," she said, voice small. I felt the old stirrings of paternal protectiveness. I saw you talking about the trust. It's impressive." I nodded. "Thank you, Laura. This was Margaret's home, but it can be so much more." Tears glimmered in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I was wrong." I paused, memories flickering our first betrayal, the courtroom battles, the trust transfer that sealed our divide. Now, here was the daughter I'd lost, seeking a bridge. "I forgive you," I said quietly. "It's time we both move forward." She exhaled, hope shining through her tears. "Can we talk? Maybe start over?" I met her gaze, one step at a time. That night I called Nancy to share the moment. "There's a chance," I said, heart full, "a real one. By Friday, I had drafted a weekend invitation for Laura, 2 nights at the villa, as my guest to help me prepare for the veterans' retreat. She accepted by text with a simple thank you. Saturday found us driving together up the mountain road. No lawyers, no power of attorney, just father and daughter. As we rounded the final curve, the villa came into view, bathed in sunlight, ready for a new chapter. Laura reached over, squeezed my hand. "I'm home," she said. Her words were simple, but to me they meant everything. Under that vast sky, with the lake's gentle waves below, I realized that true peace required both boundaries and open hearts. Our story, one of betrayal and victory, had led us here to healing and hope. And as father and daughter walked toward that welcoming front door, I felt Margaret's laughter on the breeze guiding us forward into the promise of tomorrow. Sunday morning dawned cool and clear, a gentle breeze carrying the scent of pine through the open villa windows. I woke before Laura, slipping into the living room in my slippers to brew coffee. The hiss of the espresso machine felt comforting, a return to normalcy after so much chaos. I poured 2 cups and carried them to the terrace where the sun danced on the lake's surface. Laura joined me moments later, wrapping her arms around herself in a light sweater. "Thanks," she murmured, taking the mug. Her eyes seemed softer in daylight, less hardened by last week's battles. "This place, it feels like home again." "I'm glad," I said, settling into a wicker chair across from her. "Today we have work to do, but there's time for breakfast first." We moved inside to the kitchen Margaret had adored. Laura pulled out flour and eggs, asking, "Want pancakes or omelets?" "Pancakes," I replied, smiling at her eagerness, just like she used to make. As we measured batter, the rhythm of mixing and sizzling filled the room. Laura smiled shyly when I spun a pancake like a pro. "You always were better at this than me," she admitted. I had practice. I teased, flipping and sliding a golden circle onto her plate. "But you're a quick learner." Over breakfast, we outlined the day's tasks, setting up chairs on the lawn, arranging tables in the sunroom, unpacking yoga mats. I sensed Laura's excitement mingled with nervous energy. This retreat was her idea. She'd suggested art therapy on Friday and nature walks on Saturday. I felt pride in her vision. At 10, we headed outside. The grounds glowed under the high sun. The grass was freshly mowed and dew-damp. I directed a local landscaper to shift a row of folding chairs under the oak grove, while Laura unboxed paint supplies with Nancy's help. I watched her laugh as she tested a watercolor brush, the betrayal of summer before now, a distant memory. As we worked side by side, I felt something settle in my chest, the old ache of loss replaced by a new warmth of purpose. Still, a flicker of worry flashed when I noticed dark clouds gathering over the mountains. Rain was rare this time of year, but storms came without warning here. I pointed skyward. "We might get wet." Laura looked up, concern knitting her brow. "Do we have a backup plan?" I nodded. "We'll move yoga to the sunroom and set up tables there. It's spacious enough for everyone." "Good," she said, relief in her voice. "Thank you, Dad." I squeezed her shoulder. "We're a team now." By midday, the first guests, 5 veterans in matching T-shirts, arrived with curious smiles. I greeted them at the door while Laura led introductions. Helen and Tom Thompson, peacefully excluded now, had sent a note of apology and support. "This event is for healing. Please use the villa for good." I felt a surge of gratitude. Their gesture meant Laura's misstep had given way to genuine goodwill. In the sunroom, yoga instructor Marisol guided the group through gentle stretches. I peeked in, but the group's peaceful silence drew me back outside. There, Laura and I positioned art easels under the oak trees. I offered pointers how to wet the brush or blend pigments, and she guided hands, her natural kindness shining through. As the sky darkened, Marisol called me over. "Storm's coming. Chairs will get soaked." I turned to Laura. "Time to move everything inside." She nodded, corralling volunteers. Together, we ferried chairs, tables, and painting stations into the sunroom, laughter punctuating our rush. The room buzzed with energy, the eclectic mix of veterans' voices, brushes clinking, and Marisol's calm instructions, forming a kind of harmony. An hour later, raindrops tapped the skylights. We paused under the glass ceiling, watching the summer storm bloom outside. The retreat continued uninterrupted art therapy on one side, yoga mats on the other, tea brewing in the corner. I felt the villa's walls embrace us safe from both weather and old wounds. After lunch, Laura and I led a nature walk around the property. The rain had washed leaves clean and turned pine needles bright. Veterans shared stories as we walked. One spoke of finding purpose in carving wooden figurines. Another described rebuilding his life after service. Laura and I listened, exchanging glances of pride. This villa was serving its new role as sanctuary. Back inside, the participants thanked us. "This has been transformative," one veteran said, shaking my hand. "Your generosity makes all the difference." I smiled, feeling the quiet triumph of turning personal turmoil into communal healing. Laura watched from the doorway, tears glistening. I knew the memory of this day would bind us together far more strongly than conflict ever could. Late afternoon, the storm cleared, leaving a rainbow arcing over the lake. I stood on the terrace with Laura, arms around each other. "I'm proud of you," I whispered. She turned to me, voice steady. "I'm proud of us." As dusk fell, we lit lanterns around the terrace. Veterans gathered for dinner, fresh trout, roasted vegetables, and berry cobbler. The villa's lights glowed warmly, a beacon of hope. Laughter and conversation drifted upward, the night alive with a sense of possibility. At the end of the meal, Laura took a plate of cobbler to Margaret's memory corner, her framed photograph and flower vase. She placed the dessert gently before the photo and said, "This one's for you, Mom." I joined her, and together we stood in respectful silence. The villa had transformed from a battleground of grief and betrayal into a place of reconciliation and renewal. Later, as I turned out lights and drew the curtains, I reflected on the journey from Part 1's heartbreak to this moment of unity. The path hadn't been easy, filled with legal battles, strategic maneuvers, and emotional reckonings, but it had led us to something far greater: understanding, forgiveness, and a shared purpose. My daughter and I had rediscovered our bond stronger for having been tested, and in a few weeks, we'd welcome a new group of strangers seeking solace, just as we had created it for ourselves. The villa's magic lay not in its architecture or view, but in the way it could hold grief, channel conflict, and ultimately foster healing. With that thought, I climbed the stairs to my guest room, my home away from home, feeling more anchored than I had in years. Tomorrow would bring more tasks, but for tonight I slept with a grateful heart, secure in the knowledge that the villa's doors were open again, to family, to strangers, and to the bright promise of tomorrow. By Monday, the echoes of last weekend's retreat still hummed through the villa's hallways. The veterans had left with tearful hugs and promises to return, and for a few days, Laura and I reveled in the quiet satisfaction of helping others heal. But as I sipped my morning coffee on the terrace, scrolling through my emails, a headline in the local paper made my chest tighten: "Lake Haven Villa Retreat Accused of Exploitation." My heart pounded as I clicked the link and read a reporter's bewildered take. What began as a private wellness event has morphed into a money-making enterprise, charging veterans hefty fees for services that can be found for less elsewhere. I felt a cold flash of anger and disappointment. I glanced at Laura, who was folding towels by the pool. She looked up, concern flickering in her eyes. "Dad?" she asked softly. "They're calling us exploiters," I said, pushing the laptop toward her. "They suggest we're charging vulnerable people." Laura frowned and took the laptop, reading with pursed lips. "Dad, we offered the program free of charge. The paper must be mistaken." I nodded, but the article quoted anonymous sources claiming participants paid $500 for the weekend. I had charged nothing. Every veteran had come at no cost. Still, perception can be a hard beast to battle. "We need a statement," I said, heart heavy. "Something clear, direct." Laura's shoulders squared. "I'll call Nancy and the charity board. We'll draft a press release, no fees, full scholarships, documented proof." I admired her resolve. "Good. And I'll call the reporter directly." She hesitated, then cracked a small smile. "You're braver than I am." That afternoon I dialed the reporter's number. He answered with polite curiosity. "Mr. Miller, thank you for calling. I'd love to hear your side." I took a slow breath. "Our facility is provided at no cost to all participants. Not one participant paid a dime." I cited volunteers' hours, catering invoices, and the Trust's sponsorship. "I can put you in touch with veterans who will confirm this." He paused, then said, "I'll correct the record, but you'd better send me documentation. I promised to email everything by evening." Hanging up, I felt the adrenaline drain away. Laura joined me on the terrace again, relief and worry mingling in her eyes. "I spoke with Nancy," she said. "She's preparing a list of volunteers and participants for your statement. We'll send it tonight." I rested a hand on her shoulder. "Thank you for handling that. I'm proud of how we're responding." The next morning, a flurry of emails arrived. Apologies from the reporter, corrected headlines online, and thank you notes from veterans who felt vindicated. But the scare had reminded us how fragile good intentions can be under misunderstanding. Laura and I spent the remainder of the week fine-tuning our marketing. We updated the retreat website to clearly state free admission and scholarship-based support. We added veteran testimonials. We emphasized the charitable trust's sponsorship. Each action felt like patching a small tear in the villa's new purpose. Friday afternoon, I drove up to Lake Haven to oversee the villa's spring maintenance. Derek met me at the gate holding a tablet. We've updated the security cameras and added a display sign. All retreats are offered free to veterans under the Lakeside Legacy Trust. I smiled. "Thank you, Derek. That should prevent confusion." He nodded. "Also, I've installed an info kiosk by the entrance touchscreen with retreat schedules, testimonials, and media links, clear and transparent." Walking the terrace with Laura later that day, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. She joined me, her expression a mixture of pride and exhaustion. "We did good," she said, brushing a hand through her wind-blown hair. "But this reminds me we need constant vigilance." I folded my arms. "Agreed. But it also reminds me we're building something worth protecting." Her eyes softened. "I know you're grateful I pushed for this vision." I shook my head. "I never doubted you just this week. I doubted how badly rumors could hurt us. You taught me to fight back with clarity." She leaned into me. "We make a good team." That evening, we hosted a small donor dinner in the sunroom. Local business leaders and philanthropists invited to learn about the Trust's work. As I greeted each guest, I felt the villa's warmth transform from personal refuge to communal hub. Stories were shared of veterans rediscovering hope, of volunteers finding purpose. I listened, my heart full, until it was my turn to speak. Thank you all for your support. I began, voice carrying. When this villa found itself at the center of family conflict, I feared it would lose its meaning. But with Laura's vision, we've created something far greater than any personal retreat, a beacon of healing and community. I paused, glancing at her. I'm proud of the journey we've taken together. Applause rippled through the room. Laura's eyes glistened. I caught Nancy's nod of approval. The villa had truly come alive, with purpose. After dinner, as guests departed into the starry night, Laura and I walked the perimeter. The oak trees whispered in the breeze, the lake shimmered under moonlight, and lanterns cast a gentle glow on the path. We paused at the old boathouse, still empty since Margaret's final sunset. "Do you think we should renovate this next?" Laura asked, brushing her fingers along weathered wood. I smiled, placing a hand over hers. "Yes. Let's restore it and dedicate it to community events, weddings, workshops, celebrations of life." Her grin was radiant. "Perfect." We stood there for a long moment, the past's conflict replaced by shared dreams for the future. I realized that while Part 5 ended with retreat success, Part 6 marked a new chapter, transforming clarity into action rumors, into facts, family fractures, into collective purpose. That night I slept soundly, comforted by the villa's quiet strength. Dawn would bring preparations for the next veteran group, maybe a family cooking class or a sunrise meditation. Whatever came, I knew Laura and I would meet it together, bound by the lessons of betrayal, resilience, and the power of a home reimagined for good. Early Tuesday morning, I woke to the shriek of my phone's emergency alert. A fast-moving wildfire had ignited on the flanks of the ridge behind the villa. My heart lurched. This place, our sanctuary, was suddenly in danger. I threw on a jacket and sprinted outside, the smell of smoke already tickling my nostrils. Laura was pacing near the terrace, phone in hand, her face pale in the gray dawn. "Dad, evacuation orders are going out," she said, her voice tight. "We need to get everyone to safety." I grabbed my keys. "Let's move." Within minutes, the villa bustled with controlled urgency. 7 guests, a mix of veterans and donors, gathered in the living room with their overnight bags. Marisol, our yoga instructor, her face set with determination, murmured, "We've got to stick together." The storm of tension in the room reminded me of the early days when family conflict had threatened to tear us apart. Now a far greater force loomed. I approached the group, voice steady. "Everyone, this is a precaution. We'll evacuate to the community center in Lake Haven. The drive is 10 minutes. Please follow the volunteers." I glanced at Laura, whose eyes caught mine with silent reassurance. Together we herded guests into the hall, checking off names against our roster. In the kitchen, Nancy tied her hair back and loaded bottled water and first aid kits into backpacks. Derek arrived in his utility truck, windows down so smoke wouldn't build inside. "We'll escort you," he said, voice calm. "Follow me." As we walked guests to vehicles, the smoke thickened, turning the sky into an angry orange haze. I felt the heat on my neck, a sobering reminder that nature could be as unrelenting as any legal battle. I climbed into my sedan, Laura at the wheel, and we fell into convoy behind Derek's truck headlights, cutting through the smoky gloom. At the community center, volunteers directed us inside. The gymnasium had been cleared of folding chairs. Mats were stacked in a corner. We spread out blankets and handed out water. I found myself scanning the room, faces etched with worry, children clutching favorite blankets, veterans exhaling shakily. I knelt beside a retired Marine, his hand trembling around a cup. "We're safe here," I told him quietly. "We'll get through this." Laura joined me, placing a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I never imagined this." I offered a small smile. None of us did. But we're prepared. Over the next few hours, updates crackled through the PA system. The fire had jumped the ridge but remained 5 miles from the villa. Evacuation, not destruction. Relief rippled through our small community. I called Marcus to advise him we were safe, then spoke with Nancy about coordinating meals, ensuring the veterans had support. The villa's retreat had taught me the importance of organization in crisis, an inheritance of lessons from both courtrooms and hospitals. Mid-afternoon, the smoke cleared enough to see the ridge's charred flank. I stepped outside the center and inhaled deeply, the acrid smell stinging my lungs. My gaze drifted to the lower lawns of the villa, visible through distant trees, unscathed so far. Gratitude surged. Our sanctuary stood intact, if threatened. I turned as Laura joined me, scanning the horizon. "I want to check on the villa," she said. "See what the fire crews are doing." I hesitated. She'd only just begun to feel at home, but nodded. "Let's go." We climbed into Derek's truck, who offered to drive us. Sirens from fire engines echoed in the distance. At the villa gate, we found a line of engines and volunteer firefighters hosing down underbrush, clearing debris. The sight surprised me. Community members I'd never met, neighbors from neighboring valleys, all banding together to protect this place we'd revived. I approached the chief uniform, smudged with ash. "I'm Robert Miller," I said. "Thank you for being here." He nodded, sweat beading on his brow. "Your estate's in our jurisdiction. We're keeping a wet line around the property. Should hold, but stay vigilant." Laura thanked him, her voice full of genuine awe. "Thank you, sir." Inside, I flicked lights on and off to check the power, then opened windows to clear the remaining smoke, while Laura headed to the guest quarters, checking that no embers had reached the roof overhang. We worked side by side without speaking, a shared mission, drawing us as close as any mediation session ever could. By early evening, the fire crews pulled back, declaring the villa safe. Smoke still curled from distant peaks, but our home stood resilient. I watched Laura exhale a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "We did it," she said, voice soft. I placed a hand on her arm, pride mingled with relief. We did. That night, we returned to the community center. Families had brought casseroles, a local church provided blankets. We served a simple meal, veterans sharing stories of resilience, how they'd faced far worse in combat. The sense of kinship was profound. We were all survivors of a different kind of war. Laura and I moved through the rows, offering smiles and gratitude, the lines between father and daughter, host and guest, dissolving in the hum of shared humanity. After dessert, I found a quiet corner with Laura. "I know this retreat has been about healing for others," I said, "but it's healed me too, reminded me that some things are worth fighting for." She tilted her head. "Me too. I almost forgot how much this place meant to you, everyone." We sat in companionable silence as the survivors around us laughed and talked. Evening lights cast long shadows on the gym walls. I felt Margaret's presence in every corner, the villa's spirit flowing through this temporary refuge. By midnight, guests were dozing on blankets and volunteers tidied up. The air outside had cooled, the stars shining through gaps in the smoke haze. Derek and Nancy helped me secure the community center, and we piled into my car. As we drove back to the villa, headlights cutting through the night, I realized this crisis had cemented what Laura and I had built, a bond stronger than any legal document, a purpose bigger than any personal retreat. Back at the villa, we paused on the terrace looking at the embers glowing on distant hills. The lake lay dark and still. Alone with the echoes of the day, Laura turned to me. "Thank you for believing in this place, and in me." I gathered her into an embrace. "Thank you for reminding me why this villa matters." Under the soft glow of the patio lights, we stood together, father and daughter partners, in purpose, ready for whatever came next. The wildfire had tested us, but like every challenge before, it had revealed our strength and unity. The villa was more than a home. It was a symbol of resilience, of second chances etched into its every beam. And as I closed the terrace doors behind us, I knew that this Part 7 born of crisis would become another chapter in a story of healing, one where family and community stood firm together against the fiercest of storms. A week after the wildfire scare, I woke to a new kind of tension seeping through the villa's hallways. My phone buzzed with an email from Crest Point Developments, an out-of-town firm interested in purchasing the property for a luxury resort. I stared at the screen, heart tightening. Our Lakeside Legacy Trust had only just found its rhythm when this corporate salvo threatened to unravel everything. I found Laura in the sunroom unpacking yoga mats. She looked up, brow furrowed. "What's up?" I handed her the tablet. "Read this." Her eyes widened as she scanned the proposal. Crest Point offered $2 million, enough to endow the trust 10 times over. But the fine print called for naming rights and commercial zoning changes that would forever alter our sanctuary. Laura's lips pressed into a thin line. They'd bulldoze half the woods, build villas, a spa, even a yacht club, she said, voice tight. Our retreat would be swallowed. I nodded. They see dollar signs, not this place's purpose. She sank onto a wicker chair. It would set the trust up for life. We could fund every session, maybe expand to other towns. I sat beside her. At the cost of everything we've built, this was always about healing, not profit. Laura's shoulders sagged with conflict. I know. That afternoon I arranged a meeting in the sunroom with Crest Point's lead negotiator, a sharply dressed woman named Meredith Cole. She arrived with 2 assistants' briefcases in hand, shaking mine with polished confidence. "Mr. Miller, Ms. Thompson," she began, "we love what you've created here. Our offer secures your legacy for generations." She laid out glossy renderings of glass-fronted villas and a waterfront spa. "Imagine this place reaching thousands annually with your name at the forefront." I glanced at Laura. Her gaze darted between Meredith's brochures and me, torn. Meredith continued, "Crest Point can handle marketing operations, even staffing. Your trust gets a lump sum, and we manage the rest." I inhaled slowly. "Thank you for the offer, but our mission isn't about scale or profit. It's about intimate healing, one veteran at a time." Meredith's smile tightened. "We understand that, but the model isn't self-sustaining without capital. Are you prepared to turn away financial stability?" Laura opened her mouth, then closed it. I reached out, resting a hand on her arm. "It's our home, not a commodity." She met my eyes, a flicker of pain, then resolve. "Dad's right." Meredith's expression shifted, the first crack in her poise. "If not Crest Point, then what? How will you secure funding long-term?" I stood, voice firm. "We'll continue fundraising, grant writing, community partnerships. We'll grow on our own terms, slower perhaps, but true to our purpose." Meredith exhaled. "I respect your conviction. If you change your mind in the next week..." She gathered her materials. We'll leave the offer open." With a polite nod, she strode out, leaving a charged silence. Laura leaned into me. "I'm sorry you have to relive conflict." I embraced her. "This doesn't threaten us. It shows how much they believe in the villa's value. But our value isn't measured in dollars." That night I hardly slept. I thought back to the court battles, the wildfire, the retreat's success. Every challenge we'd navigated through trust, not shortcuts. Selling out now would feel like betraying Margaret's memory and the veterans who'd found solace here. Tuesday dawned with gray skies. I joined Laura for coffee on the terrace. She looked sunken, her shoulders heavier than mine. "They're coming back," she said quietly. Crest Point's request for another meeting carried stakes higher than ever. I reached across the table. "We stand united," she nodded, tears in her eyes. "I'm with you." Later that morning we met in the sunroom again. Meredith entered alone this time, professionalism intact. She presented a revised proposal. Crest Point would donate $1 million up front, half the original offer, without zoning changes. They'd sponsor our summer retreats for 5 years, with no control over programming. The board would still carry out your mission, she promised. I and Laura exchanged glances. $1 million was tempting enough to fully fund 6 months of retreats, but I sensed the trap. An inch toward compromise, they'd earn a foothold in our operations. "Thank you for adjusting," I said slowly. "But our trust's charter forbids corporate sponsorship that binds us to one entity. We must remain independent." Meredith's jaw tightened. "Is this personal?" "It's principle," Laura replied, voice strong. "We can't risk our integrity." Meredith stood buttoning her jacket. "I admire your dedication, but know this opportunity has a deadline." She shook our hands coolly and walked out. As the door closed, silence enveloped us. Laura's lip quivered. "I thought we could meet halfway." I folded my arms. "We tried, but halfway on principle is all the way out." She wiped her eyes. "You're right. We'll find another way." That afternoon, I met with Nancy and Derek in the study. We brainstormed alternative fundraisers, a lakeside gala, a sponsored art auction, even a donor cruise on the villa's piers. Our creativity ignited as we sketched plans on napkins and whiteboards. By evening, we had dates and volunteers lined up. I felt hope surge. Our independence would be our strength. Wednesday came, and I drafted a press release celebrating independent community support. Laura edited it, her earlier doubts replaced by renewed purpose. We sent it to local media, emphasizing community-driven growth and inviting townsfolk to join us in supporting healing at its purest. Thursday, the local newspaper ran the story on its front page beneath a smiling photo of Laura and me under the oak grove. "Villa's future secured by community, not corporations," the headline read. I scanned the words with pride. Our story was resonating beyond the retreat's attendees. On Friday, an unexpected donation arrived. A retired couple from nearby Meadowbrook sent a check for $50,000 with a note, "We believe in your vision." Laura and I stared at each other incredulous. She burst into tears of joy. Saturday dawned bright and clear. As I brewed coffee, I reflected on the week's trials, corporate suitors, moral tests, tears, and triumphs. The villa had weathered yet another storm, not with bulldozers or boardrooms, but with conviction, community, and family unity. I called Laura into the sunroom and handed her 2 mugs of coffee. The lake shimmered behind her as she took a sip. "We're okay," I said. She smiled, relief and love shining in her eyes. "We're more than okay. We're stronger." Under the morning sun, father and daughter stood side by side, guardians of a sanctuary built not on profit, but on principles, and ready to face whatever came next together. Monday morning arrived with the excitement of our biggest fundraiser, yet a Harvest of Hope gala set for Saturday under the oak grove. As I sipped coffee on the terrace, I scanned the to-do list, caterers, live music, silent auction items, and a surprise announcement. Laura emerged from the villa's sunroom tablet in hand, eyes bright. "All the RSVPs are in," she said. "We've got 300 guests." My chest swelled. "That's incredible. We'll need extra volunteers to greet them." She nodded, concern flitting across her features. "I emailed the neighbors about traffic and sound levels, but some have objected complaints about late-night events." My brow furrowed. "So we have community resistance?" Laura sighed. "It's the first I've heard. They appreciate our cause, but worry about crowds and noise." I set my cup down. "We can address that. Let's invite them to a preview, show them how respectful we'll be." Her face brightened. "Great idea." Over the next 2 days, we worked non-stop. I met with our caterer to confirm dinner music would end by 9 p.m., and conferred with Derek to arrange quieter lantern lighting and sound-baffling screens. Laura drafted invitations to every household within a mile, offering personal tours on Thursday evening. Thursday arrived cloudy but calm. At 5, neighbors trickled in curious couples, a skeptical homeowner from across the street, and even Meredith Cole, the Crest Point executive, who'd shown up with a tentative smile. We greeted them at the front gate with glasses of apple cider. "Thank you for coming," I began, leading them into the sunroom. "We want to be good neighbors. Please let us know if you have any concerns." Mrs. Delgado, a retired teacher, raised a hand. "We're worried about noise, but this setting is lovely." Laura added, "Music will be acoustic only, no amplification, and we'll clear everything by 10. A few nodded smiles replacing frowns. Meredith leaned in. "I'm impressed by your dedication." I offered a handshake. "Glad you could see our vision up close." As twilight fell, neighbors dispersed with reassurances. Our preview had eased the tension. Laura and I exchanged relieved glances, another crisis diffused by open communication. Friday morning I ran through final checks, event layout, volunteer assignments, guest lists. As I checked the silent auction items, a restored antique canoe paddle, a hand-woven quilt, a weekend spa certificate, I realized how far we'd come from that first day of betrayal. What began as a family feud had grown into a movement of compassion. At noon, I found Laura in the kitchen lining up platters of hors d'oeuvres. She looked weary but happy. Ready for tonight's rehearsal, I smiled. "Lead the way." We walked through the gala set-up, tables draped in linen lanterns, dangling from branches, a small stage for the jazz trio. Volunteers moved chairs into perfect alignment. The air smelled of autumn leaves and promise. I stopped under the largest oak and turned to Laura. "This place has transformed," I said softly. "It's not just a villa anymore." She reached for my hand. "It's our legacy." That evening we hosted our volunteers for a final run-through dinner. Over roasted chicken and roasted root vegetables, I made a toast to everyone who believed in this vision, who fought for it, and who will carry it forward. Glasses clinked, laughter rang out. And for a moment I saw our community in microcosm, diverse, dedicated, united. Saturday dawned crisp and clear, perfect gala weather. I arrived early to unlock the front gate, inhaling the scent of dew-damp grass. The lake beyond mirrored the cobalt sky. I felt both excitement and nerves this event would test all we'd built. By 5 cars lined the driveway. Guests stepped onto the lawn, greeted by volunteers and soft acoustic guitar. I welcomed old friends, veterans, donors, and skeptics turned supporters. Laura appeared beside me in a flowing navy dress, her smile radiant. "You okay?" I asked quietly. She brushed a loose curl from her jaw. "Better than ever." Inside, servers passed trays of canapes, mini crab cakes, stuffed mushrooms, smoked salmon tartlets. A string quartet played near the sunroom entrance. The sound wafted across the terrace, gentle and elegant. I watched guests drift between the oak grove and the villa, laughter and conversation weaving through the air. At 6:30 I stepped onto the stage. A hush fell. I took the microphone, scanning the crowd, so many faces who had shared our journey, who had volunteered, donated, believed. "Thank you for being here tonight," I began, voice steady. "This villa, our Lakeside Legacy Trust, has survived betrayal, legal battles, wildfires, and corporate pressures. But through it all, one thing remained constant: community. You believed in its purpose when it was just an idea. Tonight we celebrate that belief and the healing it brings." Applause rippled across the lawn. I gestured toward Laura. "And I want to acknowledge my daughter, Laura Thompson, whose vision turned conflict into compassion. Without her drive, none of this would exist." Laura stepped up, tears in her eyes. She took the microphone. "I know I caused pain when I tried to claim this place, but because of my father's strength and all of you, we've created something beautiful from that pain. Thank you for giving us this second chance." The crowd cheered, some wiping tears. I felt my throat tighten, pride, relief, and love all tangled together. Music resumed and guests mingled. The auction began, paddle bids flying for every item. Meredith Cole lingered by the stage, whispered, "Congratulations," and slipped away. I watched the numbers climb on the silent auction, knowing each dollar would fund retreats for veterans and widowed seniors, honoring Margaret's memory. At 9, I noticed neighbors leaning from their balconies, smiling at the gentle glow below. The event had run flawlessly, acoustic music, respectful chatter, no noise complaints in sight. I found Mrs. Delgado and raised a glass. "To neighborly peace," she laughed, "to a community that listens." As the gala wound down, lights dimmed to soft lantern glow, I stood with Laura under the oak lanterns, casting a halo around us. The lake rippled in the distance, reflecting stars. "We did it," Laura whispered. I pulled her close. We did, together. Saturday night ended in quiet joy. Volunteers packed up and I closed the villa's doors, once more heart full. The Harvest of Hope Gala had not only surpassed our financial goals, it had solidified the villa's role as a place of unity, compassion, and renewal. Lying in bed that night, I reflected on our journey from betrayal and legal battles to wildfire scares and corporate offers, from retreats and wildfires to gala triumphs. Each challenge had tested us, but also shaped us. The villa had become more than a home. It was a living testament to resilience, second chances, and the power of community. As I drifted to sleep, I realized Part 9 of our story, marked by neighborly tensions and gala triumphs, was one of transformation from solitary refuge to collective celebration, proving that when purpose guides us, even the most cherished places can become beacons of hope. The morning after the gala, I woke to a soft glow through the blinds, and the lingering warmth of yesterday's triumph still pulsing in my veins. I rolled out of bed, expecting the usual quiet, but instead my phone blinked with a news alert: Villa's healing mission featured on PBS. My heart thundered. A film crew from American Life Stories had spent last Saturday night shooting B-roll, and they'd featured Laura's speech and my toast in their evening broadcast. I dressed quickly and sprinted to the sunroom where Laura was already up sketching ideas for next month's art therapy workshop. She looked up, eyes bright. "Did you see I pointed at my phone? You're famous." She laughed, a mix of pride and nervousness. "I guess we are." We spent breakfast scrolling through online comments. Messages poured in from around the country, veterans thanking us for change, families offering donations, even a few emails from distant towns asking how to replicate our model. The villa's story had struck a chord. A sense of wonder mixed with responsibility settled over me. This was our moment to cement the Lakeside Legacy Trust as a beacon for healing nationwide, but with visibility came new risks. By mid-morning, I had a call scheduled with the PBS producer. Laura hovered by my side as I dialed. Mr. Miller said a warm voice, "This is Carol Hastings at PBS. Your villa story moved our audience. We're considering a half-hour special." I caught Laura's breath. "Thank you, that's incredible. We'd like to film more interviews, behind-the-scenes planning, maybe even footage of you and your daughter together," Carol continued. "Are you open to deepening the story?" I glanced at Laura. She nodded. "Absolutely," I replied. "We'd be honored." "Excellent. A crew arrives next Thursday. I'll send details." Carol hung up, and I felt excitement and apprehension knot together. "Big step," Laura said softly. I placed an arm around her. One worth taking. The rest of the day flew by in a whirl of logistics, coordinating schedules with Carol's team, telling Nancy to prepare the villa for cameras, asking Derek to set up a small production space in the sunroom. By evening, the villa gleamed under my inspection. Fresh flowers at every table, smooth walkways, power outlets hidden for camera cables. As I turned off the last lights, I realized how far we'd come from a family dispute to a community center to potential national recognition. Thursday dawned gray and misty as PBS vans rolled up the driveway. The crew unloaded cameras, lights, and a dolly. Carol greeted us warmly, her team moving with professional grace. They set up in the sunroom for our first sit-down interview. Laura and I sat side by side on a love seat. Margaret had chosen the camera lens, peering expectantly. Carol's off-camera voice prompted Robert, "Tell us how this all began." I inhaled, glancing at Laura. Collectively, our voice would carry the story. "It started with betrayal," I said. Voice steady. "My daughter tried to claim this villa as her own. That conflict taught us forgiveness requires boundaries. From that lesson, we built something new, a sanctuary for those who've lost their way." The camera rolled on Laura's face as tears glistened in her eyes. When it cut to her, Carol asked Laura, "What did you learn through this journey?" I saw her shoulders straighten. "I learned that true home isn't a place, it's connection, trust, and healing. I lost sight of that when I tried to own it. Now I help others find it." They filmed B-roll of us walking the terrace, greeting veterans, picking flowers for art projects, and laughing over coffee in the kitchen. At one point, a veteran joined us for a quick, spontaneous vignette. "This place saved my life," he said softly, looking into the camera. By afternoon, the crew asked to capture our board meeting planning the next retreat. Nancy, Laura, and I huddled around a long table strewn with schedules and budgets. As cameras rolled, I felt the villa's mission pulsing like a heartbeat, deliberate, compassionate, ever-growing. That evening, Carol thanked us. "You two are natural. Our cameras will capture honesty, and that's powerful." As they packed up, I realized the villa would never feel quite the same. Public spotlight meant scrutiny, but I also felt a surge of pride our story would light the way for others. Friday morning, I awoke to a text from Laura. Mom would be proud. I put down my coffee and stepped outside, imagining Margaret's smile. While the villa slept in Friday's soft light, I reflected on how each challenge, from the initial theft to legal battles, wildfires, corporate pressure, and gala triumphs, had prepared us for this moment. The PBS feature was more than publicity. It was a pledge that our sanctuary's purpose would extend beyond these walls. That afternoon, I met with the board of the Lakeside Legacy Trust under the oak grove. We reviewed the film schedule, confirmed the next 3 retreats, and discussed expansion ideas. Some trustees raised cautious concerns about growth versus intimacy, but we reached consensus: maintain retreat sizes under 20, preserve personal attention, and use any funds raised to underwrite scholarships. Purpose would always trump scale. As the sun dipped low, Laura and I walked the villa's shoreline path. The lake lay mirror-still cherry blossoms drifting on the water's surface. I glanced at her, her silhouette illuminated by fading light. "You did this?" I said softly. "You turned my loss into a gift for so many." She took my hand. We did this together. That night, I slept soundly, the PBS crew's absence leaving only the villa's gentle hush. By dawn, headlines would announce our feature calls would come from other communities, and our work would ripple outward. But in those quiet hours, I knew that no matter how far our story traveled, its heart would remain here under the oaks beside the lake, bound by family, community, and a shared journey from betrayal to healing. The Monday after the PBS crew departed, I woke to an inbox overflowing with messages. Invitations to speak at veterans conferences, requests for interviews from national magazines, even emails from licensing agents offering a line of Lakeside Legacy-branded wellness products. My heart raced as I scrolled, excitement and trepidation building a familiar knot in my chest. Expansion beckoned doors opening far beyond our quiet oak grove, but the thought of commercializing our mission made my stomach twist with doubt. I brewed coffee and found Laura already in the sunroom, fingers flying across her tablet. She looked up, eyes bright but edged with worry. "Dad, look at this. Harvard Center for Aging wants to partner for a longitudinal study on how retreats like ours affect mental health." She tapped the screen. "They're ready to commit funding next year." I inhaled sharply. That's remarkable. But under my words lay an undercurrent of fear. Harvard research would mean data collection forms, consent waivers, protocols that could depersonalize our intimate gatherings. What would that involve, I asked. Laura bit her lip. Surveys, interviews, possibly follow-up calls after participants return home. It would legitimize our work and protect us from skeptics. She shrugged. But it could feel clinical. I nodded slowly. We've fought so hard to keep this place personal. Turning it into a research site. I trailed off. Laura closed the tablet, concern softening her features. I know. I don't want to lose what makes us us. She was right. Everything we'd built, from our first tearful board meeting to the silent auction triumph, was rooted in human connection, not scientific objectivity. Yet scholarship could safeguard our model for future trusts, preventing another corporate swoop or misguided accusation. I paced the sunroom, recalling every courtroom fight, every wildfire scramble structure had saved us. Yes, but empathy had given us life. That afternoon, I met Nancy and Derek for brunch at Murphy's Diner. Over coffee and omelets, I laid out Harvard's proposal. Nancy, ever pragmatic, tapped her fingers on her menu. Research funding could cover your scholarships for years, she said, but you need strict guidelines to preserve client confidentiality and comfort. You'll have to tailor consent forms carefully. Derek chimed in between bites of pancakes. We can set up an opt-in system. Veterans choose whether to participate, and your sessions already encourage sharing. The data could feel like natural conversation." He leaned forward, enthusiasm shining. "People share in art therapy and yoga. If framed right, it won't feel invasive." I considered their points. The vet who'd told me his life was saved here, would he welcome questionnaires? Or would he feel like a lab rat? But then I thought of those who still needed safe havens, the next generation of widows of first responders struggling with PTSD. Could our model help thousands or just hundreds? The potential weighed against the risk of losing intimacy. I called Laura that afternoon. She answered on the first ring, relief in her voice. I listened as I walked the villa's terrace, wind rustling pine needles. "I've been thinking," I began. "If we proceed, we do it on our terms. No mandatory participation. Clear opt-in. And only for veterans currently under our care." She exhaled. "Yes. Participant choice. Data only at check-in and check-out, and no follow-up calls unless they request them." Her voice steadied. "We keep it optional." I smiled at her resolve. "Let's propose that." On Wednesday morning, I drafted an email to Harvard's liaison. I thanked them for their offer and outlined our conditions: voluntary participation, minimal intrusion, and careful respect for privacy. I emphasized that our priority was healing, not statistics. By afternoon, I had a response. They agreed, pending a formal review by their ethics board. Progress. That evening, Laura and I sat on the terrace as the sun set behind the lake. I felt a familiar hush settle between us, the ebb of adrenaline after pivotal decisions. "Are you okay?" she asked, voice gentle. I leaned back, breathing deeply. "I am. This place has been tested so many ways: family betrayal, legal storms, wildfire, corporate overtures, and every time we found our path. This is just another challenge." She reached for my hand. "And we'll face it together." Late Thursday, I attended a local council meeting where neighbors once again voiced concerns, this time about added traffic from conference participants and research staff. I presented our community preview plans and outlined how we'd shuttle guests via minibuses, limit conference days to weekdays, and coordinate with the sheriff's department for parking. After my presentation, residents nodded, some skeptically at first, then with cautious approval. As I left the chambers, a woman approached me. "Mrs. Delgado, our old neighbor from Part 9's preview." "I appreciate your thoroughness," she said. "You've shown respect for our community." She extended her hand. "Well done." Her words grounded me. Every expansion, from Gatsby-level gala to Ivy League partnership, had to be anchored in respect for our roots. Losing sight of that would be as disastrous as that first family schism. Friday morning, I returned to the villas to prepare for a small delegation from the Harvard Ethics Board set to arrive Monday. I found Derek calibrating the guest cottage's internet for secure data upload, and Nancy labeling forms and consent documents. Laura supervised volunteer guides. Our combined energy filled the villa with purpose. As I passed through the sunroom, I caught Laura smiling at a new hand-painted sign, "Your stories matter. Research participation is optional." Beneath it, a quote from Margaret: "Healing grows where love is sown." I swallowed hard pride, mixing with nostalgia. So much of this story revolved around Margaret's voice, guiding us when hope felt dim. Saturday was our day of rest. Laura and I skipped retreat events to take a long hike along the Ridge Trail. The path wound through wildflowers and granite outcrops, offering panoramic views of the lake's sapphire expanse. We talked about aspirations. Laura dreamed of starting a podcast on healing practices. I mused about writing a memoir on this villa's journey. The wind carried our laughter and dreams alike, stitching us closer. As we rounded a bend, the sun broke through cloud cover, spotlighting a single oak clinging to the cliff's edge. I remembered how we had dedicated that tree for veterans' remembrance after the wildfire. Laura paused, hand on the rough bark. "I love this place," she whispered. I placed my hand beside hers. "So do I." We sat on a sun-warmed rock, letting the view ground us. No academic prestige or corporate cash could outshine moments like this raw connection with each other and the land. By Sunday evening, I felt ready for Monday's ethics board visit. Over dinner, Laura rehearsed welcoming remarks. Nancy practiced data security steps. Derek ran network tests. I reread our nonprofit bylaws, closing them with a sense of calm. We had built safeguards at every turn. Legal barriers, trust structures, community agreements. Each layer a testament to lessons learned from betrayal to healing. That night I found Laura on the terrace journal open on her lap. She looked up. Nervous, I joined her sitting on the wicker love seat. A bit, but more excited than anything. She smiled, reaching for my hand. "We've survived worse. This is just another chapter." I exhaled, letting gratitude fill me. Our villa had been tested by every storm life could muster, and each time its heart had endured. Monday would bring a new challenge, welcoming academics into our sacred space. But I felt certain we'd navigate it with the same blend of integrity and compassion that had carried us from that first family feud to this threshold of national impact. Together under the oak's quiet watch, father and daughter shared a final toast of herbal tea. Tomorrow beckoned with protocols and policies, surveys and statistics, but our mission remained unchanged. One human soul at a time, this villa would continue to heal. And that promise, more than any headlines or studies, would define our legacy. Monday dawned clear and bright, a hopeful canvas for the week's pivotal meeting. I arrived at the villa just before 8, the pine-scented air crisp against my skin. Volunteers were already setting up chairs in the sunroom, hushed conversations flitting between the oak posts. The Harvard Ethics Board was due at 9, and I felt a familiar flutter of nerves mixed with determination. This was more than another hurdle. It was the culmination of our journey. By 8:45, car doors clicked into the gravel drive, and I spotted the Harvard van rolling in. I straightened my tie. My grandson Jake had insisted I wear something grown-up for this, and scanned the circle of faces gathered in the sunroom. Laura, clipboard in hand, met my gaze and offered a tight smile. Nancy adjusted the welcome banner, and Derek ducked under a table to finalize camera placements for documentation. Even in these final hours, our team's unity gave me confidence. The van doors opened, and out stepped 3 people in crisp business casual, 2 women carrying leather portfolios, and a man with wire-rimmed glasses balancing a coffee cup. The lead, Dr. Miriam Patel, extended her hand first. "Thank you for hosting us. You have a remarkable space here." Her warmth settled the last edge of my anxiety. "Welcome," I said, shaking her hand. "I'm Robert Miller, and this is my daughter Laura." Laura stood and offered her own greeting. "It's an honor to work with you." Dr. Patel glanced around the sunroom, her eyes alighting on the oak grove through the windows. Beautiful setting for a study on healing. She stepped aside to let her colleagues enter. "Shall we begin?" We gathered in the center chairs, forming a semicircle. I sat between Laura and Nancy, relics of our collective journey, legal battles, retreats, wildfires, and gala triumphs. Dr. Patel read from her portfolio. We've reviewed your proposal, voluntary participation, limited data points, and respect for confidentiality. Today we'll walk through your processes, meet staff, and ensure our protocol aligns with your mission. I nodded. We're ready. First, we toured the villa's key spaces. The yoga sunroom, the art therapy glade beneath the oaks, the guest cottages where veterans slept, and the lakeside dock where morning meditations took place. Laura described each area's role, her voice confident, as she recounted how we'd adapted the boathouse for reflection sessions. The board members listened, taking notes, occasionally asking about acoustics or privacy policies. Next, we returned to the sunroom for an in-depth review of the consent materials and data collection forms. Nancy presented printouts, clean, concise, respectful of participants' autonomy. Dr. Patel examined one, then looked up. These are very clear. You've struck a good balance between gathering meaningful data and maintaining a therapeutic atmosphere. Relief washed through me. Thank you. Our veterans' well-being is paramount. The man with the glasses raised a question about long-term follow-up. How do you feel about periodic check-in surveys after participants return home? He asked. I exchanged a glance with Laura. She nodded slightly. If it's optional, minimal, perhaps an email 6 months post-retreat, we can integrate that, I said. Our staff will ensure it feels supportive, not intrusive. Dr. Patel made a small note. That sounds appropriate. For the final segment, we invited a veteran, Sergeant Reyes, to speak. He'd volunteered at short notice, unaware he'd be on camera. I introduced him, Sergio. Thank you for joining us. These researchers will be happy to hear from someone who's experienced our program firsthand. Sergio stood his posture straight in the gentle morning light. I was a mess when I arrived, PTSD, depression, you name it. But this place, it was like coming home. I signed the consent form and I felt respected every step of the way. His voice trembled slightly. I'm proud my story can help others. Silence filled the room as board members absorbed his words. Dr. Patel closed her notebook. Thank you, Sergeant Reyes. Your testimony confirms our belief that this study will not only advance knowledge but also contribute to a caring process. With that, she signaled the end of the evaluation. I stood, heart pounding. Dr. Patel cleared her throat. On behalf of the Harvard Center for Aging, I'm pleased to grant full approval for the study under the conditions discussed. We look forward to partnering with you. Applause rippled through our small group. I felt a wave of gratitude. This villa, once claimed by betrayal, legally defended and nearly overridden by corporate interests, had now earned academic honor. We'd preserved its intimacy while stepping into a broader role of service. The board members lingered for coffee and light snacks, fresh fruit bagels, herbal teas arranged by Laura and Nancy. I circulated among them, offering thanks and absorbing their insights, suggestions for analyzing art therapy results, ideas for integrating virtual follow-up, and contacts for publishing our outcomes. Each conversation cemented our readiness for this new chapter. By noon, the Harvard team packed up, promising to return for the first data analysis meetings. I walked them to their van, shaking hands and exchanging emails. As the van pulled away, I felt a gentle exhilaration. Our community's story, once mired in personal conflict, was now a nationwide beacon for healing. Back on the terrace, I sank into a wicker chair beside Laura. The lake yawned blue beneath us, the oaks whispering in the breeze. "We did it," she said softly. "We did." I agreed, my voice thick with emotion. She glanced at our horizon. What's next? I thought of our donors, our Harvard partnership, our potential retreats in new states. But most of all, I thought of this villa, this home that had weathered every storm. Next, I said, We welcome more healing. We keep our doors open, our hearts open, and we stay true to what matters. Laura smiled, the echo of Margaret's laughter seeming to drift on the air. Together, as father and daughter partners in purpose, we gazed out at the lake's glittering expanse. Behind us lay battles won of law, of wildfire, of corporate temptation. And ahead lay uncharted possibilities, healing for strangers, families finding solace, stories unfolding beyond our wildest dreams. And while the world might remember our villa as the place that hosted a PBS feature or an Ivy League study, we would always know it as Margaret's home, reborn through conflict into a sanctuary that would nurture countless souls. So, with the morning sun bright over Lake Haven and our promise renewed, we stepped inside, ready for the next turn in our enduring story of purpose, resilience, and love.